Definitely
Anyway,
not a bad way to do it.
all right. Well, we're rolling. We're live. Welcome to the podcast. Just go ahead and like introduce yourself, what you do, how you got into it, But don't take like 30 minutes of the podcast to do it. That's happened. That's
Darn
happened
it.
before, and I'm
Really,
like, I don't want to
man.
interrupt the story. It sounds good, I'll roll with it, but But anyway,
Man.
yeah. Go ahead and just what do you do? Who are you? Why are you the way you are?
Yeah. Well, my name is Matthew Kennedy. I'm local to Cincinnati, VP, gaffer, grip, all around swing. Pretty much anything that has to do with camera department or lighting. I take part in depending on what the set looks like. If it's a smaller set, might get to DP. And I work with lots of great DPs where I get to gaff and grip and stuff like former people on this podcast, like Ben McLean, Joe Palmer, work with Joe Cox a lot as well. Um, the reason why I am, that's deep, man. And I don't want to take up too much time, obviously, but I don't know, just visual storytelling is incredible to me. And I've always been a visual guy. I've been someone that like I'm going to be completely honest. I tried to get into reading when I was younger. I'm totally one of those people where I open a book, I read the page, and I get to the end and I'm like, I have to read that again. Like none of that process. I read it, like I could read the words, but they just don't click in my mind. So like early on, movies, shows, all that kind of stuff was always like my bread and butter. And I don't know, one day when I picked up a camera, I was like, wait, maybe I could do this for people that, like the visual side of stuff. And, one thing led to another. I met really cool people here in the Cincinnati area. And, I've been doing it for, oh my goodness, professionally, I'd say like 5 years, depending on what you consider professional.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been doing stuff related to like camera work and editing and everything for, God, I have to think about how old I am for a second. I'm right 29 for 9 years now.
Oh, okay, so you basically right around like mid college or near end of
Mhm.
college, yeah.
Yeah, so halfway through college, 2.5 years in, I originally went for computer information technology. Really wanted to be a big breadwinner and like, IT stuff. Let's go. And one semester, I was just like, I hate this. I can't do it. Like, I'm depressed going to school every day. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to skip every single day. I had a buddy in electronic media and broadcasting at NKU, North Sup, and he was like, dude, switch to this. It's kind of fun. The professors are cool. I didn't know that I wanted to do anything media related at all, but I just switched. I had like my introductory classes, and I was like, wait a second. I might be onto something here.
So was it always cinematography and camera related things, or was there another aspect of filmmaking that you thought you maybe in the beginning that you thought you might actually be more interested in?
Yeah, so I absolutely thought it was going to be editing. I had no desire to like be on a set, hold a camera, anything like that. I just wanted to receive footage, edit whatever other people's visions were. But yeah, while I was in school, we had to shoot stuff for class just so you could have the footage. And they obviously want you to dip your toes into everything. And yeah, once I bought my little Nikon D 7700, whatever. It was the only camera that I could find that was under $300 that could do 1080p 60 frames a second. And I was like, okay, I need that. But
For
yeah,
like
I
five
started shooting
minutes.
stuff. Yeah, yeah, seriously, the runtime atrocious, and I figured that out later, and that's why I had to eventually upgrade to a Sony A6500. Giant jump back in the day. But yeah, I thought I was going to just do editing, and once I shot a couple things, I was like, maybe I do like this, and I'm still doing it. So I guess it's kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, the one commonality in terms of um, the the split section of skill set that the split skill that divides editing and cinematography is color grading and the color palette. So how much has that impacted the skills between the two of them and how they translated to how you approach your craft?
Man, I mean, there's just so much, like you said, it's like connecting those two worlds, and color grading has become one of my favorite things to do. Like, I absolutely love it ever since I found out about DaVinci Resolve and like how good that is for the color grading process. I did end up being a Blackmagic camera fanboy, so I got Studio Resolve for free. Um, but yeah, I mean, being able to connect those two, like I didn't realize early on how important things that you do on set in camera affect editing, and then like you mentioned color grading and stuff, and being able to intertwine both of those. I mean, it's kind of like you hear a lot that DPs start out by obviously PA early on, but then they get into like ACing, or they get into being grips or even gappers, because since you're overseeing that entire department, it makes it so much easier when you actually know what each of those roles do. That
Mm-hmm.
way you can communicate better and be able to know, like, this guy has to set up this light, it'll take about this much time, here's what it can and can't do, instead of just being a DP who fell into it and it's like, I don't know what this stuff is, I'm just going to tell you what I want, and you kind of just go with it. But yeah, being able to marry those two worlds, I mean, it's made everything so much easier. Just understanding both sides really like helps you hone in each for each other, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. When you were first, how did you first get yourself plugged into, getting work and being a part of the local filmmaking community?
Yeah, so I actually started in the wedding industry, which has its own, own
Oh, that's
side
fun.
to it.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
some people love it, some people don't. It's for some people. I still shoot weddings to this day. I
Like
take less
Joe.
than I used to. Yeah, just like Joe, and I work with Joe. Not this, what is today's? Sunday. So not this coming Saturday, but next Saturday, I have a wedding with Joe. So
Oh yeah, he
we
mentioned
we
that.
work
Yeah.
together a lot. Yep. So the way that I got into it, yeah, I was doing weddings, and of course I'm meeting a lot of photographers and some other videographers, but not really people in the film industry. And funny enough, mentioning Joe, one day I was working for a company called Firefly, absolutely atrocious company. I won't go into that. They don't exist anymore, so it doesn't matter what I say about them anyway. But I was working for them. They hired me while I was super green. Like, I had a single camera to cover weddings, and I really didn't know what I was doing that early on. And they hired Joe to be my second shooter, which was such an eye-opening experience, because at the time, I might have only been like 3 years into doing it, 2 3 years. He was already 5 6 7 years into it. So I just come into the day like, whatever, let's just cover another wedding. And I got to talk to him about like what he does. Obviously he talked to me about directing and like working on sets and stuff, and I'm like, that's cool, whatever, that's fine, I
How long ago
guess.
was this?
But like, oh my goodness. So I'm thinking 2017, 2018, somewhere
Okay.
around there. So handful of years ago at this point, which putting a number of years on anything at this point is starting to hit me different. Um, but yeah, I ended up talking to him a little bit. We connected more after that, being like, if you need someone else for a wedding, whatever. And then a time came where Joe was working on level 7, I believe it was for winter film. And he was like, hey man, it's not like a camera gig, but do you want to come PA on the set? And I'm like, I guess so. I mean, you seem cool, I guess you hang around cool people. And after I did that, I was hooked. And then of course I got closer to Joe and stuff, and I work with him all the time, and that's kind of how I got my foot in the door, meeting people. And then of course it's a big snowball of networking. Once you work with one person, you meet other camera people, meet sound department people, and then it's like, well, now you know everybody like 2 years in.
Mm-hmm. When you were first starting out, you got connected with Joe. It seems pretty early in the beginning. Um, Based on the other sets that you inevitably end up going on, when did your ability to calibrate who is good to work with and who's not necessarily the best to work with, and the red flags of what to
Mm.
look for going on between, how you want to spend your time, start to first develop?
Yeah. So obviously early on, you'll work with anyone and you're just like, I want to meet people. But we're very lucky here in the Cincinnati area that it's not so big like in LA or in New York, that
Mm-hmm.
like there's so much stuff going on that if you're in the industry, you'll make it on something no matter what. We're very fortunate in this area that in most cases, if people aren't good to work with, they work on like 2 or 3 things, and then you never hear from them ever again.
Yeah.
But I've definitely noticed that all my professors at NKU always preach this to me, that when like say a producer is looking for someone to hire, there could be someone with like 9 out of 10 skill in something, but if they're a 2 out of 10 to hang out and be around, versus someone who's like a 7 in the skill, but
Mm-hmm.
they're like a 10 to be around, you take the person that's better to be on set. just because, it's long days. Like you might be around each other 10, 12, 14 hours. And of course, having the skill set to do something, whether it's DP, AC, director, whoever, you need that. But if you're a drag to be around, if you can't communicate with people, if you're mean to people for no reason,
Mm-hmm.
not only will your own department notice that, but other people will notice that, and word gets around. And very quickly, you start to hear, "Hey, should we hire this person for that job?" And someone will be like, "I worked with them one time. They did this," and everyone's like, "Ah, nope. All right, we're going with this other person who we know is super cool."
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, there were definitely people early on. I'll never name them, of course, but there were people who were less than ideal for me to work with on different sets, and I don't think I noticed that so early because I was like a PA. I'm like, well, of course, people are going to be mean if they're above me. But now that I've gotten to be in the position of like a DP, gaffer, whatever, I'm like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, and it makes the job so much easier and better for, I don't want to call them people below me, but like the PAs or like grips or
Mm-hmm.
whoever, like you don't have to be a jerk to make things work. And I might have believed that in the beginning because it almost feels like a boot camp where it's like if you yell at someone, they'll get the job done faster.
It's the
But it's
initiation
just not the
process. It's
case.
the hazing, you know.
Yeah, kind of. And I mean, I guess I could see some people wanting to do that for like really green PAs to like really iron something in and like make sure that they know this. But at the same time, I don't know, man. I just feel like it doesn't lead to a better product when
Mm-hmm.
people do that, in my experience.
I've seen PAs though, where it'll be their first set, and then it's small enough of a set where it doesn't feel it's professional enough to see that like everything's getting done, but because
Mhm.
it's a small enough project where the if it's the PA's first time ever on a set, they suddenly start want to chime in on the direction. They want to kind of start giving thoughts and advice, and I've
Yeah.
seen that happen before, and I'm just like, it just kind of makes me shiver a little bit. I'm like, because you kind of want to beat the crap out of them, but at the same time, you don't want to discourage them, but you also want them to shut up, you know?
No, for sure. Yeah, and I've seen that on sets. And I'm fortunate to work with incredible people, and I've definitely seen that. And usually there's a good mix of like, hey, I respect your opinion. What you said might be a great idea, but there's pre-production that went into this. There's communication between director, producer, DP, gaffer, all that already happened. Not saying that you shouldn't tell people your ideas, but don't just like step in front of the director and be like, hold on, guys, I have the idea. Don't do what you're doing. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Um, what was the thing that you were most pleasantly surprised by, other than because, well, back up a second. Word, because like you said, word in a smaller community, it spreads like kind of like wildfire.
Mhm.
It's got enough of the perks of the small town advantage, where the skill set and who not to work with. That weeds itself out early on enough to where those people don't filter up. But like when you go move to like a larger city, like and there's so many projects going on, like you just need a lot of bodies. And even if someone might not be great to work with, you just pull out the hammer and be like, no, all right, stop it, all right, we're just gonna do it this way, and then we're gonna get this done. Because normally you do need that skill set more than necessarily in terms of a practical application when there's a lot higher stakes going on, and the personalities don't necessarily affect the outcome as much because there's a lot of money at stake. At the end of the day,
Mhm.
the more money at stake, the more bull crap you have to put up with in order to actually get the project done, because you're not looking for everyone to sing kumbaya. You're looking for the product that you paid for at the end of it.
Yep.
But that's I do, because I've thought about this a lot, and I've talked to enough people now in the local community. It's like, well, at what stage, and I'm not sure of this, like at what stage of growth does a local community start becoming its own industry to where that ends up being something you kind of have to put up with, but you end up losing that small town vibe, which has its perks, but it does hold you back in terms of being able to get more work and whatnot. And so there's this trade off that happens, and I'm not sure if I'd like the community to be ready for it, honestly. because we all want bigger projects. We want to make feature films and all that stuff, and that's all what we want. But there is going to be a trade-off at a certain point if that does come to fruition, and you know you do end up losing that small town vibe when that happens, inevitably.
Hmm.
So I don't know. You can give me your thoughts on that and where that trade off you think might be worth it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna piggyback off of what you already mentioned before. The more money that's at stake every time, on a small for fun project, every minute is basically $0 minus like gas money and
Mm-hmm.
money for food. Whereas on like a big production, like when Alto Nights was here in Cincinnati, every minute that's wasted because someone down the chain got something wrong or didn't grab the right thing and bring it to set so that they can get going. Every minute that they have a road in Cincinnati closed and they're not filming and they're not getting stuff done, I mean, that's brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do that enough times and it snowballs, you're going to get to a point where it's like, well, now we have to do a pickup day where we all come back, redo this setup, and close the road again, and have to get all the actors again and do all this again. So there definitely is that unfortunate balance where, yeah, you might not be looking for, hey, that's my best friend on set, let's just hire him just because. Like, yeah, you'll definitely have to factor in both, where you need to get the job done, but hopefully you can get to that point where you can also say, okay, we're not going to hate being around the person who can get the job done for 14 hours straight.
Mm-hmm.
um, and yeah, I think as bigger projects come to the Cincinnati area, that'll definitely be something that, obviously the people from LA or New York, whoever flies in to be like the heads of it all, they'll kind of have to facilitate that. And maybe they don't know the local people as well as, if they got someone directly from Cincinnati. So maybe they just find someone, or they get recommended someone that's worked in LA or New York, whatever. And they're just like, well, I look at their reel and the stuff that they've worked on. They've been on big stuff. Let's just hire them. And,
Mm-hmm.
they might not know anything about their personality. I mean, if they've worked on bigger stuff, they should be pretty good to work with, you'd assume. Um, but yeah, I guess that would definitely make things a little hazier when bigger productions come into town. Because I think it's easier to keep it on the smaller sets where you can weed people out
Mm-hmm.
easier. But yeah, on bigger projects, especially when you need more bodies, need more people doing stuff, there's definitely a better chance for like a bad apple to fall somewhere in the department.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is the advantage of more guerrilla style filmmaking, is that you have that flexibility and that mobility
Hmm.
because you don't have to spend all this time coordinating, with all these different departments in order to move all these giant pieces that are moving around, because that takes time, that takes money, and it's very, very, it's not extraneous. That's not the word. It's an exacerbating process. Um, but the because I talked to one guy who was on the podcast who had been on some union sets as doing some electrical work, and a lot of the stories I think that you end up hearing about, like somebody blowing up on set or something like that, is that smaller filmmakers, they tend to forget that on these larger sets they have longer days. They have longer days, and so that's more iterations of things potentially going wrong and going wrong sometimes. Somebody not doing their job right, and those bad apples that end up spending more time during the day inevitably end up screwing something up or causing a situation that causes delays, and then that just snowballs, like you said, and escalates to where, okay, now there's a giant blow up and there's an article about it on this big production in the media. So it stresses, stress brings out the worst of people, and there's, I think, some grace that should be afforded to, you know the things that go on behind the scenes that don't necessarily make it into these articles that you end up seeing
Hmm.
in the Hollywood industry, and that's just something that they don't know about. Is that, like, yeah, sure, it's everyone's gonna be nicer, if they're there because they want to be there and it's their free time and they want to make a passion project, But when you're on these larger sets, um, and you start to see sometimes the pressure actually escalate because of all the moving components that you have, then you're gonna see these instances. It will happen. It's inevitable. What's like the largest
Yeah.
production that you've been a part of where you at least saw the potential for some of these things to snowball?
Yeah. So I was on a Pepto-Bismol commercial that was in a studio. I forget what the studio is. It's here in Cincinnati. I got the connection through one of my professors at NKU. Of course, again, I'm not going to name anyone and go into deep detail, but I got the opportunity to be like the B cam operator. I brought my own camera just as like extra footage for this. And the lead person in the camera department, I won't say exactly where they land on that scope just to keep things
Mm-hmm.
ambiguous. I was already warned by my professor that he was someone that, you got to be cool around, and like
Okay.
you got to know your stuff around him. And while I didn't see a blow up, thank goodness, I definitely did notice a couple times that there were people from other departments talking to him and like going back and forth with him, and he just wouldn't budge on stuff. And like he was constantly being like, "Nope, we already figured this out. We're not doing that." And like everyone's just like, "Okay, fine, we just roll with it." And I'm just over there in the corner, still pretty green at the time, especially to like a big set like that. Like that was one where there's 6, 7, 8 by frames set up ready to go for different things. There were so many lights around. And of course I've seen like my smaller sets at that time where it's like we got a couple lights, maybe something for some diffusion.
Start
That's kind of
stealing
it.
practicals from other rooms that you're not supposed to be in.
Yeah, seriously. And like they're just like, oh, we need this. Like they just need a small splash of light back there. They pull out this gigantic light that I couldn't imagine using at that point on anything for any reason. Um, but yeah, that seemed like a moment where it really set in, like how stressful it can be at times. Just because, I mean, I'm sure that guy, to try to meet him in the middle, he probably already went over with like the client and the director and all of them what they need and what they want to do. And when he heard like, we can't do this way or we can't do that, I mean, I'm sure it stressed him out. So he was like, no, we already had this plan. Again, time is money. We got to do this. We got to get it going. And, of course, from someone like my perspective, who I didn't see any of that, I didn't see the pre pro. If I was in his position, I would have been like, oh, yeah, let's just do it that way. That's fine. If that's easier for you guys, let's do it. But yeah, of course, there's always that balance of like what we need, what we want, how much time and how much money we have. How do we make that work? So yeah, that was probably the closest that I've been to seeing a quote unquote blow up. And I haven't seen one like that. But funny enough, that's probably the biggest, like quote unquote, most professional set I've been on. And of course, it comes with a story where I saw someone get, we'll call him mildly irritated,
Okay.
and express that to other people. Yeah.
Well, I want to pivot a little bit into your personal craft because that's mainly my point of personal interest and kind of where the origins of this podcast started. Because I want to dig in. I want to be there. I want to
Let's
dig in a
do
little
it.
bit. I want you to run me through. I'm going to give you a scenario, and I want you to tell me like what goes on in your head. You first arrive on location, assuming you've seen some pictures. You got to start setting things up. What is your layering process of what to start tackling first in order to start setting up the shot? And why do you prioritize some things to happen first before the others?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So is this under the assumption that I'm like DP,
Yes.
cam up kind of deal? Okay. So show up to location. First thing that I want to do is, let's assume that we already have like what shots we need or like what dialogue's going on and like a general idea of like, let's say there's a couch in a room or a table that people are sitting at, just so we have like a general idea of that. First thing I want to do is get picture up on camera, just so I know what frame is going to be. We might not have a single light or a single other stand in the room yet. Maybe no one else has even like checked out the room. Set deck might not even be in there yet doing what they need to do. And definitely not talent in just yet, but we might have someone sit in just to be like, okay, if they're going to be there, let's try to get our frame up just so we know where we need to play with lights and stands and where we can put stuff, because that's the biggest thing I see pretty early on when I was working on NKU type projects with like other students. I actually saw it backwards, where people would come in, they'd be like, okay, we have to do 3-point lighting, let's set that up now.
Mm-hmm.
And then they bring the camera in, and then you have that weird thing of, oh, now that stand is in frame, okay, maybe that light's too close, let's bring the intensity down on this light, that kind of thing. But if you get picture up and you're able to look at what your image is actually going to be, it makes it a lot easier to bring in your key light. And then you can immediately be like, okay, we need it at this intensity. Okay, now let's do a fill or get some neg in so that we can get the contrast that we want. And then, all right, let's hit it with a backlight and then play with everything else as needed. So yeah, my main goal is to always get picture up, make sure that we can see what the frame is going to be, because that opens the entire window of possibility. Because
Mm-hmm.
without picture being up, you don't know how close you can get things before they start to enter frame. So getting picture up is always like the main thing. And then we'll go through the lighting process, make sure everything's kosher there, everything's figured out on that front. And then by that point, that's usually when talent's ready to go, starting to talk to the director about, okay, this is what things are going to look like. This is what we need. This is what they're going to do. Any movement that we need to account for as well is something that we need to touch on just in case. Because if it's a locked off shot, it's really easy to get stuff right at the edge of frame and let it live there. But you know, if you got like a dolly in or like a pan in any case, then you might have to be a little bit more creative. But that kind of stuff, knowing the shot and being able to say, okay, while we land here and this is the key shot, let's say you're trying to do like an opening to a scene or something, and you're like, I'm just making this up as I go. We're shooting in a dining room, two people sitting at a table. Maybe you want to shoot through the door leading into the dining room as like an open, and then you like kind of get a two shot of them together before you start cutting to the cross shots for dialogue. It's good to know that kind of movement, just so like if that movement wasn't there, maybe you just put a light like directly on the side of the door frame and you call it a day. It does enough. But when you have that movement, maybe you're like, oh, but now as we're like wider back and we're pushing through the door, now we're going to see it there. So now you have to start playing with the idea of, do we mount lights overhead? Do we have anything to do that? Where can we put stuff to make sure that it won't be in frame?
Curiously speaking, how when you're moving through different lighting setups on a camera movement that is obviously not locked down, how do you set your exposure for multiple lighting environments for the single shot?
Yeah, so something that you might hear a lot for people who get more into it is lighting for spaces, not faces. When you light a specific subject, it makes everything a headache because you're getting light super close to people. You're having to move things if your camera angle changes at all. Whereas if you light for the space, which of course you need bigger fixtures, more diffusion, more stuff to play with in general than just a light on a stand. But once you light for a space, it makes it a lot easier, because if you do it really well, there's a chance that, again, I'll keep playing with this dining room example that I'm making up. If you light for the space proper, you might not have to move anything. Now, of course, you might fly in like a backlight just to have it as extra, but being able to light for a space and get the whole room looking how you want it to is such a time saver, and it's a big game changer for people who are really addicted to like a softbox on a light, and then just bring it like right here to someone. It usually looks great because it's a big source and everything, but what if director says, all right, time for us to get the medium shot, not the close up? Well, now you got to move that light, you got to move this and that. But being able to light the whole space, yeah, you might put some like salt and pepper on stuff here and there, but it makes it so that you have a foundation to play with and everything's exposed how you want it to be.
Do you often end up having to compromise lighting setups that might be ideal for the shot, considering when you take into consideration of how long it takes to set something up and the schedule that you're working on?
All the time. It's usually early in the day. Like, we get to set stuff up however we want, and we get to really play with it and hone it in. Maybe once we're like halfway through the day, we just got past lunch and we're like, ooh,
the food's setting in.
all right, we gotta get rolling. Like, we gotta get through this stuff. Yeah, that's another balance. I could take all day to light an interview. Like, I could take 8 hours to sit there and play with lights, make it look immaculate. But that's just not feasible. That's just not realistic, So especially being on set, all the moving parts, all the people trying to get their jobs done. Eventually it does come a point where like you're playing around with the lighting and you hear the director say, all right, talent, you can come in, get in your places. We'll do like a quick run through and then we're going to get going. You're like, oh crap. Okay. All right.
Start
we're
sweating.
still moving. We're still moving that thing, but that looks really good. Just leave it there. Move that a little bit to the right. Okay, we're good. Yeah. So you try to make use of the time that you have, but yeah, depending on what your schedule looks like, how many moving parts there are, there's a chance that there will come at least one time in the day where you're like, can I just have 10 more minutes? And you just hear no. And it's like, all right, we roll with it. We go with it.
Yeah. Does that has that led you to favored specific lighting setups? And I'm speaking specifically for interior shots that you realize, okay, this is a good go-to for most scenarios in order to be
Yeah.
able to have that flexibility to be more creative with other things considering the schedule.
Yeah. And of course it depends on like the setup and everything. But yeah, it definitely does lead to I always love getting just like a good key light setup. Just make sure that that's ready to go and get that figured out as early as possible because playing with the like fill or the neg and then being able to do backlight and add whatever practicals in the frame, I like to be able to spend more time with that, hone that stuff in because I feel like that's the real spicing on top of everything. Of course, you need your key just so everything's not underexposed and just terrible looking. But yeah, you kind of pick up on that once you do like a couple lighting setups. You realize what takes a bunch of time to set up, what doesn't take a bunch of time to set up, what takes two people to set up versus what can one person do over in the corner by themselves, you know? Like setting up an 8x frame with like some sort of grid or cloth, whatever may be on it. That might take 5 minutes to set up, depending on what brand of 8x
Hmm.
frame it is. Some are better than others. And I've worked with some that are just impossible to put together. And it might take 10, 15 minutes to get the frame up. And that may not sound like a lot of time because it's a giant 8x frame. It looks huge, it looks professional. But can we really afford 10, 15 minutes just to get it set up? And then we need multiple people to move it into position and stuff. So, yeah, always looking at the schedule, seeing what I have to work with, what I need to do. There are times where I would love to have that 8x set up in
Hmm.
a certain spot. And it's just like, oh, we got to get rolling in 5 minutes. Okay, maybe not right now. We'll talk about the next shot, the next scene, but right now we'll
And
probably roll with
sometimes maybe
something
you're
else.
like, ah, but we really need this. If I get it
Yeah.
started now, then I can say we're in the middle of setting something up, and then I have to tell a director we actually need another 5 minutes because I started it already.
Yep. And dude,
Kind
all
of
that
cheat your
stuff
way through that.
compounds. Like I'm just thinking about like I'm trying to figure something out in the camera, figuring out my framing and all that stuff. Someone else is working on setting up a light, and yeah, director comes up like, "Hey, are we ready to go?" And I've got so many things that I'm trying to balance and think about. And I'm just like, all right, yeah, we're ready. Just put the stuff down. Let's do it. Let's just do it. And sometimes it works
Yeah.
out. Like there have been moments where like, something comes really great out of that by kind of being forced to just like go. So
Is there a
not
specific
always a bad thing.
instance or scenario where that you ended up taking some lessons away from when it came to managing the schedule as well as your creative desire for a particular shot?
Ooh, like how specific? I mean, there have been people that I've worked with who have really like put that in perspective of how to balance that. People like Ben McLean, who also is an incredible gaffer, DP, and how he processes everything. We work pretty similar, but he definitely has like a structure of how he likes to get things done. Again, so that he's on time, has the stuff that he wants. And then another grip and someone that messes with lights in the area, Jacob Warling, who is actually union. He has a very interesting approach to a bunch of stuff that I don't typically do, and the way that he sets things up or frames it just so he has stuff to play with. I mean, the simple thought of since he's union and he's been on so many big
Mm-hmm.
sets and like he knows the drill. He's someone that before I even pull up to set, he's already there on the grip truck getting 8x frames and everything set up on stands before anyone even asked for him. Like no one has said that we need that. He's just got it ready to go before we even like I talk about getting picture up so that I'm ready to
Pick the
see what that
scenario
looks
then
like.
that you're most personally proud of then that has that lesson.
Ooh, man. That's a deep one. So there was a film that I worked on called Grease Monkey with Ben McLean and Joe Palmer was also on it and
Mm.
stuff.
The
That
Cincinnati
I was a
Avengers.
dude. I love it. I love whenever that lines up proper. But there was a situation where I was working with Jacob Warling. He was the gaffer. I was his grip, and we were kind of getting crunched on time. We were shooting in a neighborhood We didn't want to go too late because we had scenes where people were yelling at each other, and they were like the kind of houses that, like, if you're standing between them and you spread your arms out, you could touch both houses.
Oh wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, anything where we had, and we were talking about like a scene where someone slams something down on a table and there's just like this verbal screaming match at each other. So we're outside playing with lighting and everything, and we could hear them rehearsing like fluidly. Like it almost sounded like we were in the room. So we were kind of on a crunch because we were getting close to like 9:30 at night, and we were like, man, if we roll into like midnight doing this, there's a really good chance that someone's going to call the cops and just be like, please stop yelling.
Mm-hmm.
Two people are killing each other in this house, and there's people filming it. What is going on? Um, so we had to like have a moment where Ben, who was the DP, was like, okay, we need to get this lit for this. We need this taken care of. And me and Warling had a moment where we were like, oh my God, this is stressful. This is going to be insane to put together. But we did it. And he had so much stuff already set up, ready to go. He knew the drill, and like just being underneath him, being like, all right, we're going to put that over there, get this ready, move that around there, and then I'm going to show you where to put that, all that stuff. Being able to actually complete that, no cops were called, let's go. And everything looked good. Grease Monkey isn't out yet for me to be able to plug it and be like, hey, go look what it turned out to be, but it will be out at some point. I'll let Ben be the determining factor on that. But it just came out looking so good. And it was a moment where I really thought I was going to compromise on a bunch of stuff and just, do it so that we could get the shot done just because we needed to. Like we couldn't have this house for another day because it was up for sale, and it was like something where a guy was like, yeah, you can come in and film just because it's empty and like do whatever you want with it. But the fact that we got it done, and after I saw the footage, I was like, we didn't compromise. Like we didn't give stuff up and make it look amateurish just so that we can meet our time requirement. Was a moment that I was like, oh my God, we can do this. Like we can make it happen and actually make it look good with a pretty heavy time constraint.
What was the time constraint? Like, how much time were you actually working? How much was it? How much time was it when you had to, like, when it set in the scenario that you had to deal with versus actually shooting it?
Yeah, so we had day scenes that we had already filmed there, but we had scenes that we needed to cover at night where like you could see out the windows, like it was a different scene entirely from the day stuff. So we had to wait, I think around that time of year when we were filming. Sunset actually started at like 8:45, and
Mm.
then it didn't get truly dark where we could film until almost 9:30. So like I said, the closer that we pushed to like 11 midnight, if we did happen to go into like 1 a.m.,
Hmm.
I mean, it's not that we had like a true hard out. I think our plan was to try to be done by midnight. Like that's what it said on the call sheet. But just being a nice human being in a neighborhood, kind
Hmm.
of being like, we should get this done like before it gets super late, because then we're going to have a headache of now the producer or director has to come outside and talk to an angry neighbor or the cops, and that's just wasting more time.
Hmm.
So we just wanted to avoid that entirely, because we did have one person come out of their house and be like, hey, that light is shining into my window, can you move that? And that was like our immediate like, okay, we need to be cool to the neighbors. And that's kind of where we made our own time constraint, where it was like,
Okay.
we got to get this done so we can start rolling and get this taken care of. Because yeah, if we have four people rolling up being like, one, you're too loud, there's lights everywhere, now we're calling the cops, I mean, that'd just be more delay, and it would probably completely derail the shoot. And that's
Mm.
a specific scenario for that. But anyone who's filmed in like a neighborhood, especially if you're doing something late at night, I'm sure most people have a story of like, this neighbor came out mad saying this and that. Some people may have even had cops called on them. And I know a lot of people like Joe Cox, if he has anything going on like that, he'll actually call the local police department and be
Mm.
like, hey, this is where we're filming, this is what time we're filming. If you get a call about this house around this time about people screaming, it's us working on a film. And
Okay.
I've never had the cops called on a Joe Cox set, so I guess that works.
He
Little free
seems pretty
tip for people
prepared.
getting into it.
I haven't been on one of
Oh
his
yeah.
sets yet, but he seems like he's very prepared.
Oh
And he
yeah.
showed me some of the footage from his, which hasn't come out yet. Not Stoner. That came out a long time ago, or a while ago. I'm talking about Squalor. Yeah, I knew it started with an
Yeah.
S.
Yep.
Yeah, it just, when things run smoothly, it just makes everything so much more pleasurable, you know. And that the reason you need good pre-production for that. You know, you have to make sure that
Hmm.
you know what you're doing beforehand, which is a very big fault for green filmmakers, is like thinking that you're going to have more time than you're not, because of how long some of these setups actually take if you want them to look good, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's something that I hate to out myself, but I didn't really understand how important pre-production was until like 2, 3 years ago. Like I
Mm.
would be someone that like, yeah, I'd come to the pre-production meetings for a shoot or whatever, but I would just be there to listen to the director and producer talk about what time we're starting, where we are, that kind of stuff, and then that just kind of being it. But now that I've gotten to the point where like before I go on a film set, assuming that I get pictures of a location and like the plan for everything, I'll do lighting diagrams just to give us like a rough idea of the day. That way, when the gaffer and the grip show up, they can be like, okay, on this for this scene, he needs this light, this thing, this stand, all that. They can just have it ready to go and get into a rough idea. And I didn't realize how much time, even something as simple as that, would save on set.
Mm. As the DP, what have you found in terms of the underlying commonalities of concern that directors have when it comes to shot composition and how a shot moves?
So I'm gonna kind of piggyback on Joe just because he's the main director that I work with when I get to DP. Joe definitely he has a vision for stuff, and he's been in a situation where he gets to write what he directs, so he gets to double dip on that, and because of that, he really sees the film before anything is even captured. He
Mm.
knows what he wants, but Joe's worked with enough DPs where he knows that, in every department, not just DP, but each person brings a flavor of something. And even though you could tell them exactly what you want and need, you could talk to me, Joe Palmer, Ben McLean, Joe Cox, all of us, and you could say, "Hey, film." I'll go back to the dining room thing. Film a dining room scene of two people talking to each other. Not a single one of us will do it the exact same way. None of
Mm.
them will be the same. And that's just kind of how it is. That's the beauty of the creative world, that
Right.
even if it's the same project, none of us will do it the exact same. So there definitely is that balance where it's like, "Hey Joe, this is what you're looking for. I think this would be really cool. I think this would really work." And there have been moments where like we run through it, do like a dry run, see what the camera movement looks like, see what a pan or a tilt or whatever it may be works. And then we had that moment of like, "Oh, that's great. Let's do that." That plays into what I was thinking about. And there have been times where it's just like, "Matt, that's amazing. That is so cool. But when I wrote this and how I'm directing it, this is what I'm going for." Not telling you what you're saying is wrong or bad or anything. Carry that to another project. Keep that in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But right here, right now, this is what we're going for. Let's do that. And that's one of the beautiful things of like, I'm lucky to work with cool people. So it's not like they come to me and they're like, "Matt,
Not
you're an
just cool
idiot."
people,
No,
but cool people
shut
who
up.
know how to communicate, though. That's,
Exactly.
yeah,
It's
you have to
so
have both of those.
huge. Yeah. And being with people who can do that makes it so fluid because it takes it, you just have a simple, "Hey, this is what I'm going for, this is what I was thinking," and it's just like, "Okay, cool, that's it, let's move on, we're not wasting time." But yeah, if you're working with people who might be a little meaner or someone who can't communicate what they're looking for, there might be a lot of, "Okay, but you said this, but what I'm doing here is that," and that's just, that compounds, and that might end up being 5 minutes on set where we're just sitting there talking about a shot, not doing anything, not moving anything,
Mm-hmm.
and all the people in the background, sound department's like, "Hey, we gotta get going,"
Sound
and we're
department's
just
always
sitting
the
there
first one to
yapping.
be ready. They're always the first ones to be
Dude,
like, all right, we're ready.
they are. There is a joke of waiting on sound whenever we're waiting on set, usually because they have to like mic a new like talent that's coming into a scene
Or
or
like a lav
something.
mic falls off or something like that, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
battery dies or something, and of course they have to go change that on the pack. But at least for the sound people that I've worked with, they're usually ready like insanely fast to start the day. And I'm biased because I know Carrie Stevens very well. And I have to speak very highly of her because she's insanely good at what she does. But yeah, she's someone that on set, like I'll be taking my sweet time setting up camera and I look over, she's already got her full boom vest on, she's got her boom pole ready to go, she's holding lobs ready to mic the talent. I'm like, we're not rolling for a little while. I mean, look at me, I'm not ready. So, but good for you.
There's any jokes that go on that go on between sound and camera that you find that happens on set?
Oh, all the time, dude. One of my favorite things is, and I'm always messing with people like Joel Berg, Rachel, and Carrie, where like they'll be trying to A/B frame so that they can get a feel for like, all right, bring the boom pole down. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
right there, and you're in frame. I'll tell them that I'm on like a 14 mil lens, so we're super wide, and they'll be holding their boom poles like all the way up, and I'll be like, you're still touching the edge of frame. Yeah, can you bring it up a little bit more? And then they'll have a moment where there's like a director's monitor in the back, and they're like looking at it, and they're like, the frame is this. Like it's right here, and they're like touching the ceiling with the boom. I'm like, sorry, I just had to.
Oh, that's funny. When a director's, because it's not just about lighting, it's also the blocking of the actors and the movement. Because if they're going to shift out of that one light that you put right there, then suddenly it's not going to be what you want. And you're like, oh shoot, I got to fix that. So when a
Yep.
director is blocking the actors in the shot, how often do you find yourself trying to make something that's not working for you visually as the DP look better versus using your skills to complement something that's already there and you just have to make it work?
Yeah, I feel like in a way this kind of plays into the lighting spaces, not faces thing, just so you have a foundation of a whole scene. Like if there is a big movement, someone walks across a room or whatever, there's a lot that goes on with that, and you kind of pick up on what you need to do and what you want to do the more that you go through it. Because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when you set a light somewhere and someone stays in place, you can do so much with it and make it look so good. But yeah, there's got to be movement in films. If every film was just someone sitting in one spot, get a little repetitive, get a little boring. So, that is something where there may be compromises that you just have to play with, but you almost make that a part of the look and the vibe that you're going for, just because you have to stop thinking of it as, all right, let's make sure they're well lit in this spot
Mm-hmm.
versus let's make it look pretty good across an entire scene. Because I'm thinking of like, I mean, there's so many examples of it where, a movie or a show might have a oneer that's like 10 minutes long and there's people walking or action like fighting or something. If you really pay attention to it, not every single second of those scenes is the most immaculate looking shot and lighting you've ever seen. There might be pockets of it, of course, depending on the equipment that you have and what resources you have to be able to make that happen. And usually that plays into the blocking. It's like when you move somewhere, we're not, maybe someone walks from, let's go back to our dining room. Someone goes from the dining room to the kitchen. And maybe there's like this long hallway where it's just like, there's nothing there. Like it's just a, 4 foot wide hallway, short ceilings. You can't put a light in there where you won't see it unless there's like a practical to play with or whatever. So you almost would, in the scenario that I'm making up, you might be like, okay, for our sake, just so we can make things look real good, and assuming that we're like moving a ton, let's light well here in the dining room, make sure that looks good. We can have like almost like a darker moment or whatever, a less lit moment through the hallway. But then once they enter the kitchen, you have a lighting setup that lights the space just so it's almost like a transition built in there. But you would want to know what the blocking looks like, what the movement looks like, so that you can look at the space and be like, okay. And there have been moments like that where it's like, oh, I want my talent to land here. This is what I'm thinking, but they're in a space that's just impossible to light. Like there's just no way that we're going to make it look good. So it's like, but what if we move them 5 feet this way? Because then we
Mm-hmm.
can light through this window and we can motivate something off of that and make it look better. And 99% of the time, that's fine, assuming that it doesn't break like continuity with something else or change framing entirely. But that's something like blending composition and blocking is always tough depending on the location, but
Mm-hmm.
it might be the most fun part of getting to do it, because just setting up the light and going with it is one thing. That's cool, that's great, but being able to like build a set with lighting and like have a structure in like more than just one space, it's complicated, it's hard, but when you do it, it's so satisfying.
Is there a way that you think bad lighting can creatively actually look good, ironically?
I do. But like what I was mentioning with like shows and movies who do oneers, I almost view those moments where they're not well lit as transitions within a singular scene or shot. Like it's almost like you're going from one thing to another. While it may look quote unquote bad compared to like what the rest of it is, lit to look like, it's still like it almost sets the groundwork for the world. You
Mm-hmm.
you almost understand what the universe normally looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're kind of going between these like key moments where it's like, okay, something important is happening now that we're back into our like almost design set up lighting structure.
Do you ever find yourself going into the habit of trying to make things look a little too pretty?
I do, yeah, because there's so many situations where like I think my main one is just like a simple, just like a practical light bulb, just like a generic table lamp sitting somewhere, and we motivate off that, and we use like a huge bit of diffusion and light through it, and that's great. But sometimes I like that grittiness. One of the biggest things that I do now that I love doing, and I forget who I picked this up from, but I was watching BTS of some movie that was being worked on, and some DP or gaffer started doing a thing where they soft light someone's face, but then they'll get like a spotlight mount, and they'll just have harsh light like on the chest or the stomach or part of the body, so that you're making the face super soft and have that like contrasty wrap, but then you have like this slightly more harsh light going across the body because you can get away with that better without making a bunch of shadows across the face and stuff. So it like blends that you're making it look gorgeous, but you have that like grounding, bring me back to earth, set me in the reality harsh light, because that's what it would look like. I mean, I'm lit by like just a ceiling fan above me. I have this nice shadow
Mm-hmm.
going on right here. Not the
Yep.
most pleasant looking thing in the world. Of course, I
It
noticed that
probably
as a
would go if you
DP.
shaved.
Man, I can't do it. Not happening. Can't
I
do
feel
it.
you. I feel you.
But yeah, that's something that, and that's a blend of it where you want to be perfect, but you also don't want to be perfect, almost to set like the reality of the world. And I do feel like when stuff is lit too perfectly, you feel that it
Mm.
it almost has to be like you have to be going for that if you want it to work.
Mm. Is there a setup that you have yet to do that you think your skills would best shine in?
To a setup.
Or a situation or a scenario or some type of camera movement that you've thought about in your head? You're like, I think I would love to be able to do that.
Dude, so I'm watching Daredevil Born Again right now
Okay.
as each episode's coming out. And that show, the Netflix series and the new one on Disney Plus, is well known for like start a scene somewhere, huge fight sequences that are just oneers, just going on for like you'll check the time and there'll be like a 15-minute long fight sequence where it's just one camera movement. That is something that I would love to do. Kind of talking about all the stuff that I mentioned, like transitioning between stuff, lighting in certain areas. Some areas may not be perfectly lit. That is something that I would love to do, where it's just like a big space, big movement from A to B to C to D, have those little moments in between. And like, I just wish I had an unlimited arsenal of grip equipment and like
Hmm.
stuff to get lights up fourth story of a
This is
building to
assuming
be
you
able to
have an
shine it
unlimited
through.
budget here. So like dream
Unlimited
scenario.
budget.
Yeah.
I just have everything at my disposal, which unfortunately I usually don't. But I think that's something that I would love to do. I don't know if I'd be perfect at it my first try, because that's a heck of a lot more equipment than I have used at one time.
Hmm.
But baby steps up to that would be great. Something to just something you really have to plan the entire thing out before you even hit record. Like you can't just dry run it and be like, let's change this a little bit. You almost need it choreographed the
Hmm.
entire way for the talent, and choreograph for camera department too, being able to know, all right, right when they do this, camera needs to be right here. Once that punch lands, you move back this way immediately, and like just have a bunch of those where it's like you have to be in full control of the camera and full control of the whole scene to make it work. And if either side messes up even once, do it again. Run
It's
it
kind of
back.
like some like music videos that you see where it is like a oneer, and they're moving through different. It's very theatrical in the way that they approach it, but they're moving. They're showing on stage that the transitions between scenes during the music video are happening, and so you're
Mm.
having props actually move out of frame and then reintegrate, and then they're setting up another scene behind that they're eventually going to move the camera into. You know, it's like you also see these with like thing that comes to my mind is like the Old Spice commercials. You know what I mean?
Oh
Where there's just
yeah.
constantly there's new props. He's just always floating into a
Mhm.
new environment. It's just all seamless and everything. So that's kind of the picture
Yeah.
that I'm getting from you.
Yeah, no, something like that would be great. And I forget what the commercial was that I watched the BTS of. It was somewhere the camera was set up in the very middle of a room. It was only on a tripod, but they were slowly panning it around the room. And every time the camera would leave part of the room out of frame, people would come in, move a couch, bring a new thing in, change the lighting in that area. So as they pan back around, the talent could go into that space and it would look like a different day or a whole different room in general. And it was just filmed as one big oneer. So something like that would be cool too.
Mm-hmm. One is there a scenario that you can think of where, although some directors, you know, they have a vision, and they want that
Mhm.
vision, so
Yep.
you gotta technically so the job is to technically accomplish that in a very efficient and a very skilled manner. But sometimes, there's a little bit more back and forth. It's like, okay, well, I don't specifically, I'm more going for a vibe or a mood, but there's some flexibility as to exactly how to approach that. When it comes to those conversations of give and take and compromise with the director, how how can a DP best go about those where he's communicating his vision versus also trying to incorporate the director's vision?
So my favorite thing to do nowadays is have references for everything. So I use frame set and shot deck to be able to pull like high quality stills from commercials, TV shows, music videos, movie, all the whole shebang. Just so of course explaining something, being like, hey, I want this high contrast, I want the fall off to be quick, I want this, that. Yeah, people understand that lingo. But if I can pull up a picture from something and be like, okay, obviously we're not going to copy this to a T, but this is what I'm thinking. It is so much easier for a director, usually in pre production, to look at it and be like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I really like that. And it makes it so much snappier to be like, this is what I'm thinking. Or even if it's like not something specific to copy the frame, but if it's like, hey, look at how this practical is set up this way in the back on this frame that I'm showing you. What if we do something like that? That is so much easier to show someone than try to write 10 paragraphs in an email being like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. This is what it's called. Look up this, blah, blah, blah. Because then it's just, no one's going to get
I'm
it.
not gonna lie, that would
When you
probably
get,
be me. I'd be like, because my tendency is more of like a writer, and I want to like poetically
Mhm.
describe everything and just kind of like, and it phase into this and this, because like if you, the problem is if you see too much, you want to describe every little bit of a detail, which is
yep,
sometimes the fault of the writer director, because they've seen the vision from start to finish, and there's the weakness of not necessarily being flexible because that version in your head is only going to be the version in your head, and it's not necessarily that something can be technically accomplished on set.
yep. Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. And since you have like a writing background, it would be easier for you to do something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
again, going back to me not reading often and, kind of being more on the visual side, it
Mm-hmm.
makes it easier for me because honestly, it would be on my end that, yeah, I can use the set buzzwords and stuff and make sure people know what I'm talking about, like physically, but being able to describe, you know, distance from camera, how it looks in the background, the way that it's diffused, or whatever it may be, that would be harder to explain through. Hopefully, we're in like a meeting like this, or like in person where we can actually talk to each other. But even then, it's so much easier to be like, "Oh, pull up the third picture that I sent you of this thing. Take a look at that," and they go,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh yeah, I totally get what you're saying." Boom. All right, we're on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. To date, what is the project that you're most proud of?
Um, so you already mentioned it before.
Oh,
Joe Cox,
okay.
Stoned. I got to DP that project.
Oh,
So
okay. Were you at
that was like
were
a
you at the
big.
film festival for Stoned? I don't know if I remember seeing you or not. I've actually seen some faces that when I was at that film festival, I saw. I actually ended up going back through some of the pictures, and then I ended up having some people on the podcast that I didn't know at that time, but there were some people I already knew. So it's like I keep going back to that festival. I'm like, wait, I've had this person on my podcast.
Yeah, so I was at Catalano that just happened. recently. I don't know if it's played multiple times there. Because I think Joe took some film the year before and I wasn't there. I only just recently went to the one
I
that
was at
just
the
happened
last
not
one.
too
That was
long
my first
ago.
one.
Oh yeah, same. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So got to show off a lot of different projects that I worked on because like the God, I forget what Joe Palmer's film was called that he DP'd. I feel so bad. But he won best cinematography
yeah.
and got to hang out with him for that. And there was Mardrum that Job and Ben McLean worked on. I was a grip on that one. So there were multiple films that I got to like go up on the stage and like talk about some stuff because I worked with like half the people that submitted films to it.
There were a couple people that got up on the stage multiple times, and it was kind of funny. I'm not gonna lie.
But that's what's beautiful about it. I love that all of these people meet each other and we all work together. I
hmm
love it.
It's kind of like a giant love fest, you know.
Pretty much like you work with one director who has a different DP on something and they're like, oh, I'm going to DP for this other director, do you want to come work with me this time? And then you meet a new guy and then before you know it you've worked with everyone that's showing at a certain festival here in Cincinnati.
Do you have more enjoyment when you're on set with and the people are just the whole vibe is just great and everyone's having a good time, or on the other extreme where it's maybe not so great but you're getting to fully creatively express what you'd like to?
Oh, that's good. That's a good question. So I'm fortunate that a lot of the main work that pays my bills is like just freelance videography stuff. So it's usually just me, maybe a director and a sound person. So
Mm-hmm.
not true film set stuff. So when I do get the opportunity to work on film sets, when certain people hit me up, and I'm going to keep mentioning them over and over again, Joe Cox, Ben McLean, Joe Palmer, any of those people are like, hey, I'm DPing this, I'm directing this, I'm doing whatever on this. I always take those immediately because I know that they're going to bring good people on set. And, even if we are limited gear wise, lighting wise, or even just a skeleton crew, I know the people that they bring in are going to be great to work with. So maybe the project quality wise for what I'm looking for might only end up being a 6 or 7 out of 10. If I know the set experience is going to be a 10 out of 10 with the people that are on the call sheet and stuff, I'll take that job immediately
Mm.
because that's kind of the part that I love. Because since I'm fortunate enough to not primarily be doing like film sets, like commercials and
Right.
features and stuff as like my bread and butter, being able to be a little more selective about film sets kind of lends me to get to be on the quote unquote more fun ones
Mm-hmm.
with the people that I know personally. And in my experience, I there are short films that I've worked on that just come out looking incredible. And maybe I only knew like one person on set. And of course, that's great. I love getting that experience and I love being able to say that I was a part of that. But the films I look back on the best might be ones that, don't make it into festivals, don't end up being the best looking thing in the world. But I loved it. The experience on set was the best. So
Yeah.
yeah, you just can't replace that. Like there,
You wouldn't have it any other way.
yeah, like I'm not trying to say that making a good looking project is easy and it happens all the time, but it's not very often that you get to land on a set where like pretty much every single person personally and you've hung out with multiple times, worked with multiple times. So like when you go from camera department to sound department, you're cracking jokes. You go to the grips and the gaffer and you have jokes with them too. They're all joking with each other. It's a different feeling when like everyone is friends with each other on set. And that might lend to, you know, goofing off and like not being as efficient as you can be.
Right.
But to me, I mean, as again, assuming that not millions of dollars are on the line here, I would rather have it that way, where like we just feel like, of course, we got to get our job done. We still want to do it. People are
Sure.
giving
Yeah.
up their time for this, but the experience on set, it's you can't replace that.
Mm. Is that the most emotionally fulfilling aspect of filmmaking for you?
I think so, and that's why I DP, grip, gaff, AC. I do all of it because I mean, if Ben McLean texted me right now and he's like, "Hey, will you AC for me next weekend?" I don't need to know anything else about the project. I'm there. Or if
Mm-hmm.
Joe Cox is like, "Hey, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, do you want to DP this?" Yeah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
in. I'll
I
see you
remember the
there.
time
Like
that
I'm
I first I met you. It was on Ben's set, but I didn't know you at the time. I just knew through Brian and then Ben for doing a short film that they did. And you're sitting there behind the monitor, you're focus pulling and everything. He's like, and you're like shouting directions, like, "Can you bring him a little closer or whatever?" It's like, I didn't get that quite right, and it was fun to
yeah.
see the dynamic everybody going on.
And dude, that makes it so fun being able to like I think there was a specific moment where Ben got a really good shot and I missed focus and
Was it in the
being able to
ring?
like
Was it in the ring?
I think, yeah, because
Yeah, it
there
was in
was
the
one
ring.
point where we got interference with the wireless video transmitter. So it got super pixelated on my screen. So I couldn't really see what was happening. So I tried to just follow where I was putting focus
You were
before.
flying
But I think
blind.
I think talent, which of course they have the right to do, I think they were slightly in a different position from the previous takes, but they were doing a bunch of action stuff. So of course they were going to move around. But being able to just like yell out and be like, sorry, Ben, I missed focus. And he just laughs about it is amazing. Instead of it being like, all right, give us a second. Ben walks me over in the corner. He's like, don't you dare do that again. You're wasting my time. I get this done. I mean, it's a totally different dynamic.
Right. Well, Matt, it's been great having you on the podcast. Appreciate it. It was cool to get to know you actually, because I'm kind of going around, like I said before the interview, and like I'm throwing pokeballs, seeing who's gonna bite. You know. Is there any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
I guess the only thing that I can say, assuming that filmmakers are listening, be good to other people, be kind to other people, network with people, work with different people, get your feet wet, do a project that doesn't sound like the best thing for you because you never know who you're going to meet, what's going to end up on your reel. You don't know where that's going to lead you. Filmmaking is a beautiful thing no matter what you do, whether it be camera, sound, writing, directing, all that. You don't know where this can take you. And I'm fortunate enough that I get to do it full time. 10 years ago, I would have laughed if somebody told me that I was going to get to be freelance, make my own schedule, not work in the same place every single day in a cubicle or whatever. Not knocking people that do that. More power to you if that's what you enjoy, but you don't know where you can go. And it's up to you to make those connections, be a good person, make it happen. And wherever you are today, you might be in a totally different place week, month, year from now because of one person you meet or one project that you work on and make a good impression. So, yeah.
That was a good TED talk.
Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Uh,